biggest thing we hear from American people who want to move to New Zealand is that they're worried because the wages aren't as much as they're used to in the US. But here's the thing. There's plenty of things in New Zealand that you are going to save stacks of money on because you no longer need to buy.
Yeah. So it's just a different mentality. And so I think people underestimate the cost of those things. I say a lot of the US, it's just nickeling and diming yourself. You don't realize all the weird little things you spend money on that just adds up.
This week we're going to talk to Ryan. Ryan is a popular guest on this show. He's American, he lives in New Zealand just outside Auckland, and he has got a wealth of experience about things like money, how much things cost, and how much you can save. So let's jump into the show and find out how an American living in New Zealand is going to save quite a bit of money. It's a Drama, coming to you from Taranaki, New Zealand.
Hello.
Daddy, I love him!
Mother thanks you.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Hello. Okay, here we go. Hello, Ryan, and welcome back to the podcast. So excited to have you back on here.
Thank you. Always nice talking to you.
Yeah, this is actually your third time on the podcast. This is a world record. It's just to have you back is just you're just so popular, Ryan.
I do what I can.
The reason we're having you back is because I like talking to you, but it's just we're going to be talking today about things that you moved to New Zealand from America. How many years ago was it now?
4.5.
4.5 years ago. And you are now part of our private New Zealand community group.
Yes.
And while you've been on that community group, people have been saying to you, oh yeah, I would move to New Zealand, but it costs so much for this, it costs so much for that, and what about this? And so we just thought it would be really fun to talk about. We've got 4.5 things that you don't buy anymore since you've been living in New Zealand, and therefore you've saved money on them. So we thought that would be really fun to talk about that.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, are you all set?
I am ready. I'm ready to go.
Right, let's show these people in America then that once you get to New Zealand, these are 4.5 things you're not going to need anymore. You're going to be better off financially. All right, so number 1 is designer clothing. I didn't think about that. Go ahead. Why?
Yeah. Well, I think really clothing in general. Joanne, my wife, she did point out to me when we were talking about stuff like this. She said, designer anything, right? Because, she used to live in New York City and she used to live in some of these bigger cities where all that stuff mattered and what you wore and all that kind of thing. Who wore the dress best? All that stuff is a thing, right? And we've recognized it just is not. It is not here.
Right.
Most of the people I know have a limited wardrobe, especially at work, right? I don't think most people have a separate wardrobe for work and play, right? There's just a lot of that stuff where we started saying like, oh, there's not a lot of walk-in closets, and now we know why.
Right. That's interesting.
Just the sheer amount of clothing that I know we used to have.
And just to be clear, where did you come from in the States? Where did you come from?
I was originated on the East Coast in Maryland, so it kind of wraps around D.C., Washington, D.C. So there's a bit of that. It's very, I don't know, there's a lot of people in Maryland that are very kind of keep up with the Joneses.
Oh, really? Really?
Yeah.
Bit fancy?
Yeah, when it comes to stuff like cars and all that kind of stuff, it's kind of like the status symbol thing.
Okay.
And I just don't find that New Zealand has as much of it, obviously.
And you are living in, because this is important, this is an important part. You live in Auckland, don't you? Just whereabouts do you live again?
Yeah. I'm on the Whangaparoa Peninsula, which is, technically in Auckland, but I'm sure there's more posh areas of Auckland where people care more about this stuff, but I haven't seen a lot of it. Right, you tend to think of people driving the really super expensive cars, and unless it's a Tesla, which everybody would just like to have, people get to that like, oh, it's somebody driving a BMW, or it's somebody driving a, it's like, oh, they think they're better than us. you know.
So when you were in America, and your wife Jo, would she get dressed up to go to work, or are you just talking about to go out for dinner and stuff like that?
No, even just to go to work.
Really?
She would have her work clothes, and she'd have her, come home, because you come home from work and change, and you do the, and to a lesser degree, I think she still kind of does that, but I think it's as much just because that's her personality. So she still dresses up a little bit, but I think that's just kind of residual. When you look at people, it's not as much of a concern. I haven't worn what I would consider a dress shirt since I've moved in this country.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, the idea of wearing a suit, I can't imagine wearing one here.
I know. I can't imagine you in a suit, really. I just like your casual look.
Yeah. I mean, I still technically own a suit from when I got married, but I don't even think I'd fit in it anymore. But there's just none of that. I mean, even when you go into job interviews.
So what's your job? Tell me your job again.
I work in software, so it's tech companies. I work for tech companies.
And what sort of clothes would you wear for an interview for a tech company? If you were going for an interview, what would you wear?
I could wear this.
Could you? Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody would care. Nobody would bat an eye. It's really interesting to see that. I mean, people still try to do, your, what I guess I would call that maybe casual. What's that word for? Not quite. I wanted to say semi-formal, but semi-formal is still a suit, right? Yeah.
I don't know. Just casual, isn't it? It's just.
Yeah. I mean, I remember having the conversation with the guy for the first job, and I'm still in the States, and he's here, and I was like, "So what do people wear to work?" And he was like, "Oh, just kind of casual, but a little nicer than casual." And I was like, what does that mean to
What's the word for that, though?
Yeah. And he would go like, kind of like what you would wear to a barbecue. I was like, what do you wear to a barbecue? Like, what do you wear at the barbecue in New Zealand?
Yeah. I suppose just like a short sleeve shirt and pants, long pants maybe. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was kind of funny. But then I get here and people would come to work in shorts and t-shirts and that kind of stuff, and I was just like, oh, I'm in a very different world.
Yeah. It's a great point. Yeah. And it's so interesting. We've just been down to Dunedin to spend some time with Miley and Brian, who I know are friends with with you. And we went to this really nice restaurant. I don't know if you've been there. It's called Number 7 Balmac, is it? Balmac? Yeah, anyway, it's a beautiful restaurant in Dunedin. And she'd booked us a table, and we'd been out walking just up on the cliffs, and, we were I was in some baggy pants and a shirt, and Brian was just in his shorts and shirt and everything. And we had the table booked for 7, and I said to Miley, even now, after 12 years, I was like, do you think we should change? And we're like, nah, just go as we are, and you do. It's so casual and so refreshing. I can't be doing with it. Can you, all posh shirds, and it's restricting.
I can't imagine wearing a tie again. Like, that's just... And even in the US, I'd really only wear ties at this stage, probably if you go to, formal events, like weddings and funerals. Yeah. But also job interviews. I would still wear a sport coat and a tie to a job interview.
In the
most
US?
Of the time, in the US.
Yeah.
But here, that's just not... Now, again, I'm sure it depends on what you do for a living. There's probably certain jobs where you're going to dress like that. I tell you, the VP at the company I work for, he comes in shorts and a t-shirt every day.
Does he? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, nobody even cares if you walk around barefoot, which is still something I find fascinating in this country.
So there's another thing you see. You don't have to spend money on fancy shoes either, do you?
No.
Because, just put your jandals on and you're good to go.
And if you want to dress nice, that's great. Go for it. But it's not the expectation. It's not, people don't tend to look down on you for how you dress. Yeah. At least I haven't seen it much. I'll just say that.
No, and I'm gonna 100% agree with you because, like I say, I remember when we lived in Bath in England, which is quite a posh part of England, Yeah. And I remember I had a fake fur coat, and every winter I'd put and it was a lovely coat. It was just beautiful, it was like, and I had a big hat with all the fur around it, and I just thought, can you imagine? I just cannot imagine. I'd probably be laughed out of New Zealand if I put that on now. Like, it was just now you just wear your big ski jacket or whatever.
Yeah.
It's
well,
not.
And I'd say parts of the North Island, you don't even need a lot of variety of clothing,
No.
right? Because, I wear the same jacket all year round. If I need one, it's the same one I wear in the winter as I do in the spring or in the fall, in the autumn. There's not a lot, at least up here. Again, on the North Island, I know the South Island is very different. They have proper seasons. But there are parts here in the North Island where we just have the temperatures kind of do this. Yeah. And it just depends on whether the sun exists. So.
Does your wife miss? We'll move on to the next thing now. But does she miss dressing up? Does she miss getting dressed up nicely to go out to restaurants?
If she wants to, she does. I mean, that's the thing. Is it's not that people will look at you funny for doing it. It's that you don't have to do it.
Right.
It's that people won't look at you funny if you don't.
Have you ever been to what's that place called, Brian? London, where you go and have the high tea?
Savoy.
The Savoy Hotel in London. Have you ever been there? Oh, right. No. So we were in London once, and we were like, oh, let's go and have and we were dressed really smart, had the fur coat on. Brian was in his smart trousers, and we got.
No, I had a pair of jeans.
Oh yeah, but that was it.
Long black coat.
He had a long black coat on, and underneath his long black coat was a nice pair of jeans, not like Dossy or anything. Really quite nice, from Gap probably. And we get to the door. Oh, it was so pompous. It was just like, I'm sorry, sir, you can't come in. You're wearing jeans. We don't accept that. And I was like, are you kidding me? And we stood there and we're like, oh, come on. We don't exactly look like we've just rolled in off the street, But no, they weren't having any of it. And it was just, no. You never get that in New Zealand, would you? Can you imagine?
No.
It's just...
I can't imagine that happening anywhere. I cannot imagine. I mean, again, I know, my children walk around without shoes in stores. We go places and there's just kids walking around with no shoes on. That's just, they don't even allow that in beach towns in the United States.
Is that right? Do they not?
Yeah. You still see those signs that say no shirt, no shoes, no service, right? Those signs are real. Every once in a while you'll have somebody that's like, no shirt, no shoes, no problem. But for the most part, you at least have to be wearing some sort of sandal or something.
All right.
It's different.
So that's nice and refreshing. Right. Number 2 that you said, well, we don't spend half as much money on this, so we're saving a lot of money by living in New Zealand, is holidays. So holidays in the United States. What do you mean by holidays?
So it's holidays in the U.S. sense, so you're thinking like your public holidays, your Christmas, Easter, New Year's, for the U.S., 4th of July, all of those types of what we would call holidays in the U.S.
Right.
So we in the U.S., there are holidays and vacations, right, as opposed to just the holiday of I'm not at work. So the U.S. just does everything. There's no middle ground in the U.S., right? You either don't put up Christmas lights or they can see you on the moon, right? So it's just that throughput comes through for most of those holidays. Just as an interesting side note, for people from the U.S. who are used to seeing flags everywhere, that you don't see them very often in New Zealand, okay? In the U.S., I'd probably say every second or third house has a flag.
What do you mean, like a flag of the country?
Yeah, the U.S. flag.
Oh, okay. Why? Why?
That's a whole nother conversation.
Okay, all right.
We
live in America.
We'll call it rampant patriotism.
Okay, sorry.
But it is very much like that's a thing, right?
Right.
And then the 4th of July rolls around, and then the flags are just ridiculous. They're everywhere. They're on all the stores. People will put little flags in their yards, and there's so it's just this big red, white, and blue explosion. That you just look at all of this stuff and all of the toys at Christmas time, the just that rampant consumerism concept is just not what people expect here.
Yeah.
kids get a handful of gifts at Christmas and they're happy with that, right? At least, again, most of the kids that I've seen, you get a handful of stuff. There's stuff for them to open on Christmas, but it's not this bacchanalian festival of toys.
It's so true. I'm so glad you brought that up. It's so true, because literally it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, isn't it? Like, just being spent on all this. Like, how much is a flag? How much is one of those flags that you put up outside your house?
It depends on how big you want it to be.
Well, I want it to be huge, obviously,
Yeah, I mean, but then you're also like, I need to put a big pole on the front of my house so that I can, the flags aren't particularly expensive. I think they sell enough of them that they can sell them for a pretty low price. Yeah, if you want to go to the store and say, it's almost 4th of July, I need to buy a bunch of stuff. So you go to stores and you buy a bunch of, I need some ribbons and I need this, and it's just, I need a shirt that says proud to be an American, and I need, just all that stuff that just you find adds up. If you think about it, you do it for every holiday. For Halloween here is not, first off, it's not even a big thing.
No.
I think on the peninsula here, with the however many people, which quite a few people live on the peninsula, there's like 2 neighborhoods that regularly do Halloween.
Oh, okay.
Then there are some that'll do little stuff here and there. But again, the candy that's given out are like a couple of lollies.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. As opposed to the U.S. where you'll get like full-size candy bars and you'll get... And again, go ahead.
No, go. You go. You go.
Yeah. And it's like... And again, the houses are all... the people that do it.
Yes.
And it gets nuts.
Yeah.
And it's just full on. And... the costumes and stuff are very elaborate, and I think my kids have been the same thing for Halloween the last 3 years, right?
Do they miss it though? Do they miss that? Because there's one thing, I mean, I don't know, we've always, like the kids have always dreamed of being in America for Halloween, because you guys, the Americans, they know how to do Halloween, and I know, like this is supposed to be but you save money, but I'd love to experience that. I'd love to just go and see what it's like.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool every once in a while, right?
Yeah.
To see some of those things and to experience them. But year in and year out, you just realize that it's just so much.
Yeah.
And I think, at least my kids, I found that they like the more subdued side of things.
Did they?
They appreciate the things they do get. Those are the things that are important. I mean, I remember, we didn't have one this year because of lockdown and everything. But the previous one, they got I want to say that most of their candy fit in like a decent sized Ziploc bag, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that's just kind of what they got here. And it was like, they were so excited to see all this candy, But in the U.S., you had like a proper
shopping
grocery
trolley
bag. Yeah, you'd have like a grocery bag full of all this stuff. And, the kids don't eat it that fast. No. And if they do, they're going to get ill. But you also see some of that excess just comes out in a lot of the aspects of American culture. And I think that's just a very good example. All those holidays, all those individual little moments that you just kind of go, why? Why is Christmas 2 months long? And why is Easter a month and a half, where you see Easter bunny stuff and there's all the chocolates and all the candies and everything for Easter is just all over the place. And here you see there's some some little Easter candies here and there, and your hot cross buns. That's of course the big, one of the big things here that just like pretty much doesn't exist in the States, at least not where I live.
Oh really? No hot cross buns in the States?
No,
that's
I think
interesting.
the first hot cross bun I ever ate was in this country.
Oh really? Oh
yeah,
they're nice, aren't they? Hot
they're really good.
Melted butter. Whoa, they're so nice. They're really lovely. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. But yeah, it's just a different perspective on things.
Yeah, and it's thank you. And it's not until you say it like you say, and you say, oh no, it's only Easter. Oh no, it's only Christmas. It's only a little flag. It's only this. But all those things, like you say, all add up, don't they? You know.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to see how much you spent in a year on all those holidays. I'd be interested to know the exact amount.
Yeah, stuff like Valentine's Day. I mean, I know people like to watch. See, here's something that a lot of people, they watch those American movies and American TV shows and go, it can't really be like that. And most of the time it is. It's pretty close.
Yeah.
Valentine's Day is ridiculous. It is a month-long event. And so all of these things you start noticing, there's almost always a holiday.
Right.
Right? Because they're trying to sell you something. So it's like, it's Christmas, but then you'll have like Halloween, then Thanksgiving, then Christmas, and then it's New Year's, and you've got Valentine's Day and Easter, and it just, like, the whole year there's something.
Yeah, Mother's Day and Father's Day and, all that sort of stuff, isn't it? And it's not to say that they don't do that in New Zealand, because they celebrate all those holidays, don't they? All right, like Halloween, maybe not as much, but they still do it.
Yeah.
But it's just on a much smaller, classier scale, isn't it? It's just more old traditional values, like you say. Just give the kids like a one little lolly or something, and not a sack of goodies. So
So it's just a different mentality, and so I think people underestimate the cost of those things. I say a lot of the U.S., it's just nickeling and diming yourself. You don't realize all the weird little things you spend money on that just adds up. And I think holidays are really good examples of that, especially the big ones where you decorate, where you're spending a lot of money on Christmas decorations. And I mean, I knew a woman who had, I don't know, 4 or 5 bedroom house, right? So she would have 6 Christmas trees in her house. Each bedroom had to have a Christmas tree, and then there had to be the really large one in the living room. And so you're just like, okay, that's 6 Christmas trees, but that's also 6 Christmas trees worth of lights and decorations. And then each room also needs other decorations, because you can't just have a tree, and you just start going, wow, it's expensive.
Yeah, it is. I wonder how much it costs to, like, I always think about that, like when you see all these houses with all these lights all over the rooms. Have you ever seen the film The Griswolds? Yeah. So when he lights up all the house and everything, and you just think, and it is like that, isn't it? When you go over, you do see things like that. And I wonder how much it would cost in electric alone to have those lights all on over the holiday
I don't know.
time.
And that's not to say, for those people not in the United States, it's not every house is like that, all right? And I recognize that it's not everyone. But it is the dichotomy between almost an all or nothing.
Yeah.
I remember I tried to decorate for Christmas tastefully when my wife would make me decorate for Christmas, because I am kind of a Grinch, so I'd always take that into account. But it was always like, I want tasteful. I don't want this.
In your face.
Yeah. And so driving around in the evening right now, it's nice to see there are some houses with just a little bit here and there, and there's this every once in a while I will see a house that kind of makes me go like, are we in the States? And that is like literally my first thought, right? It's like, did I drive back to the US?
There's an area in New Plymouth, I love it actually, and we've always taken the kids there. And the whole street joins in, and they do light up their houses, and they put things in the gardens. And I must admit, I'm a bit of a sucker for Christmas lights. I love them, but I can see what you mean. It would get expensive, and Well,
if everybody did kind of like the Christmas rom-coms that come out every year, right? And they're always in that small town where there's just pretty lights and those kind of things. That's great. I love that. I think that's super pretty. When it's done right? That those usually are done in a slightly more tasteful style than, like you said, in Christmas Vacation, where It's just ridiculous.
I love that film so much.
It's hysterical.
Yeah. Okay, and then number 3 we were talking about was holidays. No, vacations. I always get mixed up because if you're English, a holiday is a holiday. In America, it's vacation, isn't it?
Yes, that's what you would refer to it. Yeah. That's why I was just trying to use the travel, word just to make it a little bit more here and there. So
tell me how you've saved money on vacations while being in New Zealand. You live in the best.
I think it's interesting because from a travel perspective, you can go all over the place, right? You can spend in the U.S. You can spend almost nothing if you're a camper, right? Because campsites in the States are cheaper than campsites in New Zealand.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so with a lot of the national parks and stuff, you can go camping really cheap.
Right.
So that's kind of one of the nice aspects in the States. And I think one of the things that people often underestimate is the size of the U.S. So even traveling within the U.S., getting places is expensive.
Right.
So a lot of it is you're talking about your flights, you're talking about your time and energy you take into travel. Where if you're going a decent distance, for example, I used to visit my brother in Florida. So I could go the cheap route and drive, which would take me almost 2 days of driving. But it would often be cheaper, depending on what you did, and if you just drove straight through. If you had somebody to drive with you, you could do stuff like that.
Would you do the whole thing in what without staying in a motel? You just drive the whole 2 days, would you?
Some people would, because really it would be, I think from Maryland, it was something like a 16-hour drive to get to my brother. If you take turns, you can do it in one go.
Right.
But even when I moved to Nashville, I think on our good day, we did a nice, I could get there in 12 to 13 hours to visit my family up in Maryland. And then you start going it only cost me food and fuel, which wasn't too much, but it also cost me 13, 14 hours of my day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where you just lose a day on both sides.
Yep.
And when you don't get a whole lot of holidays, those 2 days matter. Sometimes when I think of cost, I don't just think in terms of money. I think in terms of time and effort.
Oh, okay. That's interesting, yeah.
So a lot of families, when you have larger families, my brother has 5 kids, right? He's not flying anywhere. Because even if you go, it's only like a $50 flight, you go, that's
times
now
5, yeah.
Yeah, no, times 7, because he and his wife are going too, right?
Oh, he's got 5 kids.
Yes, 5 children. And most flights aren't $50, right? Even cheap flights will cost you around $100, right? So you're talking about, at that point, it becomes a $700 trip. Or he could drive, and it's going to take him a day, but it's more valuable, right? So you have to start weighing those things out as to what's the best way of getting around. So that's one thing I find interesting. Here, flights are relatively cheap. You're in a smaller area, so it's easier. Driving here is funny for an American because we're so used to, for us, the interstate system, what we would call motorways, which from my perspective don't exist here.
Oh, what about that big road going out of Auckland, the one with 3 lanes? That's an interstate.
Yeah, it's 3 lanes until you leave Auckland. Then it goes back down to 1, right? I mean, that's the thing that makes me laugh, because you can see them, they're in Wellington. Most of the major cities, they have these big roads in the city. And then as soon as you get outside, it's like, nope, that's it.
Yeah, I suppose the difference in New Zealand is easier to get to places. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, in some ways, because it's smaller, so it's easier to get places. The attitude is it's going to take you time to get there, and just enjoy your drive, because you can't drive the whole trip at 100 kilometers per hour, right? In the U.S., you can cover vast distances in small amounts of time because there's these huge interstate systems. So that's kind of a benefit in some ways in the U.S. It's necessary because of the distance. In New Zealand, you just don't have those sorts of distances. So people just don't bother putting those in. And if you're driving around some of these like interesting spots, you're driving real slow.
Yeah.
You know,
looking all around you and just enjoying the scenery and.
Yeah, so you have to be willing to take that slower pace.
Yeah.
But I kind of consider that a benefit to me. And I think from here, there's a lot of places you can go to if you're going east. You know, it's not expensive to get to Australia. It's not too expensive to get to most of the Asian countries, the islands, and those kind of stuff. I remember in the U.S., something like Fiji just felt like the ultimate place I could never get to.
Yeah.
Right? It's like that's going to cost me like $10,000 to get there and stay there and do all that kind of stuff. And it might be an exaggeration from a kid who grew up poor. You know, we took a holiday there, and it didn't cost a whole lot for the whole family to go to a nice kind of all-inclusive resort and those kind of things.
What, you went from New Zealand to do that, did you?
Yes. From New Zealand, and it wasn't too bad. Now, admittedly, if you're into being in Europe, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg from New Zealand, right? Because it's the other side of the planet, as I'm sure you experience anytime you try to get home.
Yeah.
But I think I just find traveling easier here.
Yeah, me too. And also, it's New Zealand, so you know, we had this conversation when we were in lockdown. You know, when like we couldn't travel anywhere, and we're like, oh, it's a shame we can't go to Thailand, we can't do this. It's like, hang on a minute, we live in probably the top destination in the world that everyone else wants to visit. You know, so let's just really enjoy living here and spending our holidays here.
Yeah, I remember the first couple of times we drove around between places, and all I kept saying was, this country is just beautiful. Everywhere I've been to is beautiful. And having the discussion with Joanne, and she would go, you know, the U.S. has a lot of really pretty stuff, but there is a lot of distance between it. You know, and that's the thing. You just have these vast areas that aren't as pretty. Yeah. But I have yet to see an ugly part of New Zealand.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true.
Yeah,
like you say, you everywhere you go. Oh, this is really nice. You know, so that's a really good point. So you'd save money on that.
And just going places. I think there's just so people know the expectations. Some of those aspects. Some things here are slightly more expensive from an American's perspective. Yeah, where sometimes we say stuff like, "Oh, when you do a thing, it's going to cost slightly more with a family." Yeah. I feel like there's more free stuff to do here.
Definitely. That's a whole different topic, isn't it? There's so much free stuff to do here.
Yeah. So you can go to a location and you're going to spend a little bit more on like hotels and stuff like that because those are a little pricier. But there's just more to do. Yeah. Especially if you're an outdoors person. Yeah. Right, so number 4 we've got on here, and I knew we were going to go over time, but number 4 was insurance. So I think this is probably, I know that you're a big money guy and you can talk till the cows come home about money, and we have got, at the end of the show, I'm going to just put some extra links that we've done with you before, talking about the cost between New Zealand and USA. But insurance, you must save a fortune being in New Zealand, not having to buy. That is probably for me, that was like the single best savings moving to New Zealand. I think without any effort, my family in the U.S. spent probably between $12,000 and $14,000 a year on various medical expenses.
God,
okay,
that's extortionate, isn't it?
It is. It's huge and it's crazy. And being the only industrialized nation, I think, that doesn't have universal health care, the U.S. is like the only country where people can go bankrupt because of medical expenses.
Oh, I still can't get my head around it, Ryan. Honestly, it's just weird, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really. I know we talked a little bit about this previously, so I'll try not to go too far. I'll try not to tell the same stories. But you do have a lot of moments where you ask yourself, is it worth going to the hospital? Is it worth going to the doctor? It's interesting because I've seen a couple of specials on it nowadays where they talk about, I think John Oliver did a piece where they had this woman whose leg was stuck in the New York subway system. Her leg was like stuck in between the subway car and the place you stand on or something like that.
No.
And you know what this woman is screaming? Don't call an ambulance. I can't afford it.
Oh, no.
And you're like, that is like your first thought of, I can't afford that ambulance. Please don't call it. Just somebody pull me out and drive me, right? An Uber is better, right? This is the way. So, yes, as someone who, for those who don't know, when I was in the U.S., I worked for both a very large insurer and a very large provider.
Right.
So I can tell you, when I tell you my expenses, some of that was having really good insurance that wasn't too expensive on a monthly basis, just our premiums and such. And I think it's one thing people get really concerned about, because it is, when you're an American, you automatically think, what is this going to cost me? And I think that's just on the broader topic. In New Zealand, what you see is what the cost is. There isn't additional weird costs. If you come in and get a trade-in and they say, this is going to cost you $300, it's not $300 plus the tax I put on. It's not going to be $300 plus materials I didn't tell you about. Right. And so those are the ways that you're always thinking about in the States. Right. And so a lot of the stuff here, if they say something costs $40, it's going to cost you $40. There's no weird hidden costs. There's no tipping. There's no, the GST is included in the price, those kind of things that you forget about. And so I think a lot of people that aren't from the U.S. get very confused about how the U.S. medical system works, because a lot of people that live in the U.S. get confused as to how the U.S. medical system works. And there's just the whole, I could go on a whole diatribe, but basically there's a lot of different ways that it's going to cost you money.
Yeah. And
you have to weigh with yourself where you want to pay that money.
Yeah.
That's what most of it boils down to. So to come here and to recognize that everything for children under the age of, I still forget I think it's 13 or 14.
I think it might be 12, isn't it? I think. Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, around there anyway.
Yeah, somewhere in there. So you're talking 12-ish or whatever. Everything for those cost you nothing. Nothing. Not prescriptions. When you think about stuff like dental, a lot of schools, there's, at least in this area, the schools bring around like mobile dental places every once a year or something, I think is what it is.
Yeah.
And so kids get checked at school. Yeah. Which is great because it helps out people that are in poverty and those kind of things. They still get checked, Now, dental is more expensive here on average, but knowing that your kids are covered and they can get some stuff there, that's all right. I still, as in my experience, dental doesn't cost significantly more here, but it's a little bit more. But the rest of the medical is non-existent. For people in the States, the idea that my prescriptions are $5 each, right? And repeats cost nothing.
Yeah.
That is not a thing. In the States, I'm an asthmatic, and I take allergy and asthma meds mostly. Okay. But in the U.S., those would cost me upwards of about $100, I think, every time I filled those prescriptions, which were supposed to be once a month, which I didn't take as often as I should have because they were so expensive.
Yeah, exactly.
I just turned it into every other month,
Yeah. It's like I say, it's hard to get your head around. It's just, you know, like I say, on our community group, we've got all different channels, and one of them is healthcare. And we get so many messages from people saying, how do I get, which private health company do you recommend in New Zealand? And you're like, you know, why do you need private health insurance? You know, why do you need private healthcare? And literally they just can't get their head around the fact that you don't really need it. You know, it's...
Well, and it's also oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, we've got some nurses on there, you know, on the group, and they're saying, unless you've got serious health issues that you really need, you know you're going to need a lot of help with. If you're just an average, you know, Joe who's just maybe go to the doctor when you've got a bit of a cough, don't bother, you know. Yeah. There's no point.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that's a lot of the people I talked to when I first moved in. Because, it is hard as an American to wrap your head around that concept.
Yeah,
But the reality is most people don't have private health care. Most people I've seen, I think it's, for Americans, you start to think, if I'm paying more money, I must be getting a lot of stuff for it, right? And the recognition that for all emergency services, private healthcare gets you very little, if anything. The only thing it's going to get you is to go into private hospitals, which I don't know enough about to really talk to. No. Just because I know I spent recently here about 5-6 months ago, I spent about a week in the hospital.
Why?
I had blood clots in my lungs.
No, I didn't know about that.
Yeah, out of nowhere. It was so weird. But, I mean, I was in the hospital for a week. And, you know, most of the time you're going to be in a room with a couple other people. You know, that happens. You know, they've got the larger rooms with people. You know, some of the stuff in the States, you might only have 2 people in a room, you know, and that kind of stuff, the cost. And I still joke about the fact that I feel like I'm waiting for a bill.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for a bill. I remember I went in to get a test done, and it was around lunchtime, and a girl is wheeling around a cart, and she says, "Would you like a sandwich and a cup of tea?" Right? And do you know what my first thought was?
How much?
How much?
Yeah.
It was and I stopped for a second, and I was like, how much is this going to cost me? Right? And so she hands me my sandwich, she hands me my cup of tea, and walks away. And I'm like, are they going to bring a bill around? You know, it's just ingrained into me that's reality, right? Yeah, it's like I would never have done that in the States, because I would have gone, no, I'll just walk downstairs and get something, because you're probably costing me some delivery fee. I don't know. Yeah. You know.
No, it's interesting that you should say that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very different.
It is, and it's a massive, like you say, it's a massive thing that you just don't take into consideration, do you? Until you get over here, and like you say, all that money you're spending every month on healthcare, and all of a sudden you're not spending it. You must have felt really rich. More money to spend on the flags, I say.
Yeah,
I've got 12 Christmas lights out.
Yeah, I've got 12 flags out front. It's very different. It's just a very different world.
Yeah.
Especially the medical thing is one of the biggest. I think the only people I only know 1 or 2 people I think that have private health care, and they're elderly.
Yeah.
You know, they're in their 70s or 80s.
Yeah.
Right. Those are the only people I know that have private health care right now.
Yeah, I must admit, I don't know anyone with private healthcare. Not that I know loads of people, but I don't know anyone of our friends or our age group that have got private healthcare. And I remember when we moved over here, and I made friends with a lady doctor, and she just said, Don't bother. Just don't bother, because it crosses your mind. You're like, oh, should we? It's the same thing as and I'm doing an interview with your wife next week, and she's a doctor, and she's a teacher, and it's the same thing with schools. You automatically think, oh, I need to send them to private school because that will be a better education. So I can't wait to speak to Jo, your wife, because that's another question that comes up a lot in the private community is, what about private education in New Zealand? And you're like, Really? You know, it's just, but yeah, it'll be so, I can't wait to talk to her about that.
Because we had considered it as well.
Yeah, who doesn't?
We thought about it.
Yeah.
But once we got here, we're like, oh, we don't need it.
I know.
Yeah, it's interesting to get used to.
It's a whole a shift in your mindset, isn't it? It's a completely different world.
It really, really is. Because I think the only thing you really get for non-emergency things, you can jump the queue a little faster. That's pretty much what private healthcare gets you here. And for me, that's just not worth it. But that's about it. For emergency services, you're getting help just as fast as anybody else.
Yeah.
What's the point, right?
Yeah.
It's not like you're getting world-class doctors. I mean, most of the time you literally have the same doctors.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Yeah, I've heard exactly the same. They literally walk out of one door, go across the car park, into the private hospital and start treating the people. And it's like, oh, hang on a minute, you know. Yeah. Right. Oh, it's just been so fabulous talking to you, Ryan. And I just want to say that if you're listening to this and you're in love with Ryan as much as I love speaking to him, go and listen to our USA versus New Zealand cost of living, because we went really deep into that episode, didn't we? And we talked about, you know, mortgages and cost of living and housing, and it was a really, really good episode. So make sure you go and listen to that. But yeah, I just want to say thanks so much, Ryan. Really, it's just, I love talking to you. I always learn something new about the States when I talk to you. It's just always like, oh, I didn't know about that.
Oh yeah.
All right, Ryan. Well, I'm going to wrap it up and say thanks so much for joining us, and we are going to get back together again, because I know we're speaking on the community, but I just love having you on here. So thank you so much, Ryan, and I'll speak to you soon. Okay, bye, darling. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye. Oh.
Or even if you live in New Zealand with kids and you want to know what goes on in the classroom, what goes on with your kids 6 hours a day, then you're going to love this episode.
But legally, if you are 5 years old, you're entitled to start school on your birthday in New Zealand, which is quite different, because in the States,